So we are, as I said, toward the end of chapter 53 of the last chapter of Likutei Amarim. Again, the first book of the 5 books of Tanya, the most foundational book. When people say they're studying Tanya, usually they mean the first book, Likutei Amarim, as we mean. And we are very close to the end. Very exciting. So where are we holding now? Well, we're actually sort of like at the punchline. We were discussing in this chapter that investing in the lowest dimension of the spiritual world of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus, sovereignty of Atzilus, and then that filter, the filter of God's presence of Torah, how Torah is the filter that allows creation to happen, and then that does the same thing in the next world, in the world of Bria. Again, that whole package, investing in the holy of holies of Bria, the will and wisdoms of Bria, and then going into the lowest dimension of Bria, God's creation, God's output dimension, God's speech, sovereignty, Malchus of Bria. And then again in the next world, in the world of Yetzirah, investing in the holy of holies, the will and wisdoms of Yetzirah. And then in the sovereignty of Yetzirah, the creation of Yetzirah, the Torah of Yetzirah. And then in the final spiritual world, the holy of holies of the world of Asiya, the world of descent, the will and wisdoms of the world of descent, the Torah of the world of descent, and then investing itself in Malchus and sovereignty and the creative element of the world of descent. And that was all what we were saying last chapter. And now what's happening in our world? We said, well, in our world, there's also a holy of holies. We know exactly actually where it is, on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, right? Har Moriah, Yerushalayim, the temple. There's a holy of holies. There was a physical room called the Holy of Holies. And in that physical location, that's the Holy of Holies, like the Holy of Holies of every spiritual world, right? In all the 4 spiritual realms, you have the Holy of Holies. You have God's will and wisdoms. You have the Torah. That's the Holy of Holies. That's where God's presence is. And so too in our world. Because what was in the Holy of Holies of our world? Basically, the only thing there was the ark, the tablets, the luchos, the Torah. God is found in Torah. And we said that the Holy of Holies of our world is actually more intense than any of the spiritual worlds. That's really the totality of God. It wasn't an expression, a dimension. We said in the world of Atzilus, the Torah is Kabbalah. In the world of Bria, the Torah is Talmud. In the world of Yetzirah, the Torah is Mishnah. In the world of Asiya, the Torah is Mikra, is Tanakh, is scriptures. And what's the Torah in the Holy of Holies of our physical reality? The entirety. The entirety of God's will and wisdom, that is the Torah of our physical reality. So the intensity of the energy of the Holy of Holies of our world was far higher than any of the spiritual realms, which makes sense. It sounds weird. It's like, what? That's such an oxymoron. Our world is more holy than any of the spiritual worlds? Of course, our world is a point and purpose. Our world is where it's at. Of course, that's where it's the most intense. And how does that slither into our world? How did that get through the strictures of physicality? How did that get through the processing of the films of what we call klipas noiga, the barriers around our world that constrict the godliness? Well, we said because this energy didn't go through the normative channels. Normally, for godliness to get into our world, it has to go through the entirety of the world of Tzilos, and then the next world Bria, and then the next world Yetzirah, and then the final spiritual world Asiya, and then get into our world. But that's not what happened in the Holy of Holies in the first temple. We said it got to skip the line, so to speak. It went through the spiritual dimensions of Atzilus, the will and wisdoms of Atzilus, jumping into the sovereignty of Atzilus, the will and wisdoms, the Holy of Holies of Bria, the world of creation, and then going into the sovereignty, Malchus of Bria, of creation, and then it came straight into our world, unlike everything else. It completely skipped those entire 2 worlds of Yetzirah formation and Asiya descent. It went directly into our world. So the intensity of that energy was so palpable that the world was a very spiritual place in the time of the first temple. Not just meaning the Jewish people, of course, and the Jewish world, of course. Literally, this energy went out into the world, and therefore God's presence was very, very real in the world. It was tangible. This was God's energy higher than any spiritual dimension in our physical reality. That was the first temple. And then that got destroyed. And then we had a second temple. And we said, well, now the Holy of Holies is not as intense. because actually, though it's the same concept of the entirety of Torah, the entirety of God's will, the entirety of God's wisdom, higher than in any spiritual world, but it goes through more dimensions. It doesn't only go through the Atzilus and the Bria. We also go through the Holy of Holies of Yetzirah. And we also go through the sovereignty of Yetzirah. And we go through the Holy of Holies, the Torah, the will and wisdom of the final world of Asiya, the world of descent. Meaning we only get to skip one level. The one level that was skipped in the Holy of Holies of the Second Temple was sovereignty of Asiya, Malchus of Asiya, sovereignty of the world of descent. That level, the energy of the Holy of Holies skipped. So therefore, even in the Second Temple, which was not on the stature of the First Temple, there was still a more overt godly energy in the Holy of Holies than anywhere else, because we did skip that final layer of concealment, sovereignty of the world of Asiya, Malchus of Asiya, sovereignty of the world of being, of the world of descent. But then that got destroyed. Now what? Now what? Because from then until now, it was the same now. 1900 years ago, now we're still in the same situation. Where's our Holy of Holies? Do we have a Holy of Holies? We have to. Every world has a Holy of Holies. What was the function of the Holy of Holies? Where God is found. Not at all surprising. The Holy of Holies of our world is consistent with everything we've learned until now but the Holy of Holies. Meaning, what was the Holy of Holies of all the worlds until now? What do we say the Holy of Holies was? I know we had a long break for Pesach. I did try to review now, but it was very quick. And I'm totally open for questions because maybe it was too quick. But the Holy of Holies.
The Ark.
The Ark?
The Ark.
What was in the Ark?
The Ark of the Covenant.
What was in the Ark of the Covenant?
The Torah.
Exactly.
Legend. Okay.
That's the Holy of Holies. Within the Ark of the Covenant is the tablets, is the Torah. That's the Holy of Holies. And that was consistent in every spiritual world. You know, what's very interesting, because I feel from these chapters, this series of chapters, meaning the last 3 chapters of this section, Likutei Amarim of Tanya, 51, 52, 53, and people could say like, oh, it's sort of technical. It's not as like inspirational, to use that overused word. I think we gain from here such a practical appreciation for Torah. Torah. This is it. It's Torah. Everywhere we look in these 3 chapters, we keep coming back to Torah. In every world, Atzilus, the world of being, Bria, the world of creation, Yetzirah, the world of formation, Asiya, the world of descent. They each needed a Holy of Holies. What's a Holy of Holies? Where God is found, or using the technical term, where the Shekhinah, where the indwelling of God is found. And on every level, that Holy of Holies, the will and wisdom, is the Torah of that world. So where's God found? In Torah. You want God? He's in Torah. We additionally said and discussed at length last chapter that in every world, for creation to happen, for that world to be fleshed out with the creations of that world, well, we needed a filter, if you remember the concept, that the energy of God is too intense and any creation will get blown away. It's like the rays of the sun by the sun. You can't have the rays by the sun. How could creation exist? By the source of creation, because there's a filter. Well, how could there be a filter? If the filter is stronger than the source, then that filter will also negate any creation from existing. And if the filter is weaker, how does it help? It'll also get blown away by the energy of creation. We said because the filter is Torah. And Torah is beyond the energy of the infinity of God invested in sovereignty, because Torah is from the Holy of Holies, from the will and wisdom. And at the same time, that Torah descends to each world and therefore relates to, has a connection to, allows the opportunity of that world to exist. So what we've seen here, very practically, in a lot of very concrete technical details, is that in every world, the repository of God, where is God found, is in Torah. And also, in every world, what is allowing that world to be? Torah. So we're consistent, where we're not saying anything that we haven't said before. In all the spiritual worlds, God's found in the Holy of Holies, Torah. Creation flows from the sovereignty through the filter of Torah. In our world, as you said, the Ark of the Covenant, the tablets, the luchos, Torah. So therefore, when we have the destruction of the physical home of God, we don't have a first temple. We don't even have a second temple. But God still has a Holy of Holies. What is his Holy of Holies? Torah. Torah straight. Torah without a structure, without stones, without gold, without measures and dimensions. Torah is still consistently the Holy of Holies, meaning the place of God's immanent presence, the indwelling of Shekhinah, the indwelling of God's reality in our world is through Torah. So when we want, whenever we want, go for it. Connect and be one with God. Walk into God's home. Become God's home. Learn Torah. Fulfill Torah, right? We have the learning of Torah, the study of Torah, that my mind is one with the mind of God. My lips are one with the lips of God. My inner breath is one with the breath of God, as we've learned in previous chapters. And we have the expression of Torah. We have the fulfillment of Torah. We have the commandments. When can I access God's Holy of Holies? Whenever I want. So this is an amazing concept, because if we would just compare, in the times of the temple, there was a specific space that I could go to at a specific time. Now it's everywhere I want, whenever I want. In the times of the temple, I went into the home of God. Now the home of God is inside of me. In the times of the temple is the handiwork of man. That's God's home on this world. Now it's straight, it's direct. It's Torah, it's the handiwork of God. So of course, we want a physical temple, and we want Mashiach now, and we will have a physical temple with all of the physical details that are so significant to God's whole desire for creation, the physicality, the physical expression of his will, the building of the temple. But from a spiritual perspective, whenever I want. So someone just asked a really good question. How was learning Torah different in the times of the Beis HaMikdash? How was learning Torah different in the times of the temple? So it was different. And it was different because they had the revelation on a layer that we don't have. If you remember, and again, it was pre-Pesach, and pre-Pesach is like I don't know how many hundreds of years ago, but especially in the times of the first temple, when it was all of the intensity of Torah, God's self, God's being, God's will and wisdom, skipping the two worlds of Yetzirah and Asiyah, formation and descent, we said there was such an intensity. It was so palpable, God's presence in this world, that people were different. For sure, the Jewish people were different. Really, the whole world was different. How were they different? We could say like they were awake. Their eyes were open, their hearts were open, their ears were open, and we're sleepwalkers and sleep talkers. Our mind doesn't really get it. Our hearts don't really get it. We're going through motions compared to how they experienced God in the time of the temple, especially the first temple. Their love and fear and awe of God was so strong. It was so natural. God's presence was so there, not just in the temple, in the ark. It like the windows. Remember, the windows of the temple were contrary to any windows in a building because the light was supposed to go outward. So that light of God's presence showered the world. So when a Jew in the time of the temple studied Torah, he got it. His mind got it. His heart got it. He experienced it on a totally different level than anything we can experience, because even if we, let's pretend, are as smart or smarter, which we probably are not, but even if we are, we're anyway being smart in our sleep. What then am I bringing out is so amazing about now, if answering the question then sounded more amazing. Because when we're looking at it in terms of my ability to be one with God, now it's totally different. In the times of the temple, they were awake, their eyes were open, their hearts were open, their minds were open, but God's temple was there, Jerusalem, Mount Moriah, Ark, Holy of Holies, Ark, tablets. Now God's temple is here. When I study Torah, God's temple is me. I am the Holy of Holies. I am containing inside of myself God's energy in a way that they did not contain it in the times of the temple. So, which is better? Well, as Sarah just said, we want Mashiach now. We want the synergy. We want the best of both. We want all the advantages of the temple. We want our eyes to be open and our minds to be open and our hearts to be open. We want to be thinking for real and understanding for real and feeling for real. And we want to continue to be God's home. We want to be God's temple. And that's Mashiach when we have both advantages. But again, then God's presence was palpable. Like, even if you think of the world then, the world were, I'm not talking about the Jewish world, I'm saying the broader external world were idol worshippers. Well, idol worshippers means that all of creation on some level had an awareness of God. Not the right awareness, perhaps, but there was an awareness of God. Well, we would look at our world and whatever, We could, there's a lot of other things we're worshiping besides gods. When we went through the Enlightenment and Reformation and the worship of the mind of man. Now we don't worship the mind of man. We just worship things, right? We've deteriorated. But it's all really reflective of God's lack of overt presence in the world. When God is there so overtly, even if you're not going to serve God, you're going to serve a vision of God. A God you made up, but still something you're envisioning as God. Because you can't not. God's presence is so real. So that's the downside of this reality. But at the same time, whenever I want, and nowadays, you don't even need to open a book, go online, listen to a class, read the text yourself in whatever language probably you want. Torah is so accessible. And when I'm studying Torah, and when I'm doing the commandments and living Torah, God has a Holy of Holies. It's inside of me. And that is really like the takeaway punchline of everything we've been discussing. Understand, God is very accessible. He's so accessible. Whatever you want, go to Torah and become one with him. Go to Torah and become his home. What does become his home mean? That's like a pretty phrase. What does it mean? Have God dwell inside of you. You give God space, right? The real estate of your mind and your heart and your soul. You give God that space, that he has a Holy of Holies. He has a home. And the home is inside of every Jew who opens up through the study of Torah and the fulfillment of Torah. Any questions
I have a
or
question.
thoughts on this? Sure.
Yes, thank you. First is a point of clarification. When the rabbis or when the Kohen Gadols would go into the temple and they would expire on Yom Kippur, and so they had a rope attached to their legs, was that during the first temple or the second temple?
Both. It's actually both.
Oh, both. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Even during the second temple. And it's very interesting because in the times of the second temple, we're told that it wasn't the rabbis, it was the high priest. And we're told that the high priests were not on a very high level. They would literally buy the position. And yet
Correct.
still, even though they were going to die that Yom Kippur, they still wanted it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess, thank you for clarifying that, because I was just wondering, in those times, it seems that the power of the temple was so intense that it could result in fatality if you weren't sufficiently holy to enter. Now, we're living in a mundane society, as you mentioned, that's very materialistic, very vain. It seems kind of not plausible that the Holy of Holies can dwell within us individually when we're at such a low level. It seems like we have to do a lot of work to get to that level where our powers are overwhelming as it was during the first and second temple.
That's such an interesting point. I would think the response to that would be, again, this is what I think will be the answer, but I'm open to anyone else having any other ideas. That's a great thought question. I think the point is, and this goes back to what someone else asked me about the difference of studying Torah in the first temple or the temples or now. There's two different scales or two different measurements: the spirituality and then the investment in the world. Meaning, on one hand, and those things converge and do a sort of dance, but like trying to make it super like as if it was, which it isn't, black and white simple. On one hand, there's the intensity of the spiritual experience. And you're absolutely right, of course. We are right now, by the way, God's home. Of course, I see a bunch of screens, so I don't know what you're doing. But assuming everyone's mind and heart is with me, as much as sleepwalkers and sleep talkers, their minds and heart could be with me. And I definitely know for myself, I mean, I'm focused, I gotta be. I'm God's home right now. Am I experiencing it like, forget about the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur. Am I experiencing like any of the passerbyers that went close to the temple felt that energy? Not at all. But my lack of experiencing does not preclude the experience. It actually allows it to be. It almost became much more, if you will, democratic. I don't feel the intensity, but it happens nonetheless. And the fact that it happened deliberately nonetheless means a much greater penetration of the physical, which is the point and purpose of it all. The ultimate point of all of creation is for the physical. The point is not spiritual. If God wanted spirituality, he wouldn't have created in the first place, let alone create a physical reality, which is a total oxymoron and makes absolutely no sense. But he wanted physical. He desperately wanted physical. He craved physical. The word in Hebrew we use for it is a taiva. It's a desire. And a taiva desire means it's inexplicable. Because if it was explicable, if it was rational, we would have called it desire. It would be reason. It's not reason. It's a desire. Makes no sense. So God, so to speak, in a way that cannot be explained, wants physical. The more physical, the better. From that perspective, God wants your body a lot more than he wants your soul. From that perspective, the more physical the commandment is, the more earthy it is, the more whole body experience it is, the better. So I can have very spiritual experiences. I mean, relative to being sleepwalkers and sleep talkers. Well, we can have spiritual experiences. We can be connecting with our mind and feeling passion in our heart. And that's helpful. It's helpful because it inspires me to give God my body and to do all those physical things, which is what he really wants. Or to explain this from a different angle, the same concept. When Mashiach comes completely revealed, Mashiach is here. It's here in our very earthy physical world, a world free of all evil, but still a physical reality. It's actually one of the only dramatic moments that we veer away from Maimonides, right? We very much believe in Maimonides' approach in many things, but Maimonides, Rambam, unlike Nachmanides, Ramban, and the Kabbalists, holds that the ultimate point of it all is to become a spiritual reality. Kabbalists and Nachmanides say no. The ultimate point is to be souls and bodies. The ultimate point is a physical reality. So going back to your question that I'm trying to create the energy of understanding, in the times of the temple, it was an incredibly spiritual experience. In our times, God has what he wants. His home is in people with very clay feet. His home is in very physical hearts and minds. And that's actually where he wants to be. Anyone else have any other ways they would respond? Because that was a really great question. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, so why do we need a third base in Mikdash?
If so, have we not reached the perfection? Because this is not Mashiach completely revealed. Because ultimately, God wants complete physical and the impossibility, but hey, he's God, he can want whatever he wants. Complete expression of his essence and being in that physical. Meaning now, every one of us can do something Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob cannot do. Moses and Aaron cannot do. David and Solomon cannot do. Right now, at this moment, again, all the minds, sleeping minds that are with me, my sleeping mind. Right now, I am one with God. My mind, my soul, my animal soul, my vital soul, my powers of soul, and God are one. No soul above has God one. They experience godliness. They experience, going back to that concept of the first and second temple, they experience. So it's like, whoa, so much more fantabulous and cooler and experiential than I'm not feeling a thing. I'm not feeling a thing. But my mind and God are one. Only in this world can we be one with God. But we don't feel it, and that's why we can have it. If we felt it, we would expire from the experience and we wouldn't have it. But since we don't feel it, we can have it. That's the reality of this world. The souls, in contrast, when a person passes away and the soul ultimately reaches Gan Eden, the heavenly abode, the reward, are experiencing godliness, not God. For God, you have to be here. So much lesser level, not the sun, rays. How strong the rays? Well, it depends what you did in this world. But even very strong rays, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, David, and Solomon, they're higher than Gan Eden. They're all in Atzilus. They're in the highest world, the world of being. They're still only experiencing rays. They're experiencing it, though. So it feels amazing, but it's only rays. What's Mashiach? What do we need a third temple for? What's Mashiach? Mashiach means we are souls and bodies back in this world, can have God, can be one with God, and can experience it and not expire in the process, which means the world changed. Creation, these chapters 51, 52, and 53 are all about creation, right? Creation, that was an impossibility. God could not be revealed in his essence being and the world handle it. If God's revealed in essence being, there's no world. There's no space. It's this or this. You have God or you have world. No revelation of God's essence being, world would cease to exist. Through all of the work of the Jewish people, through 5,785 years of Torah being spoken and studied and experienced and lived, the fabric of the world has changed. And now God's essence and being can be in this world permanently, permanent revelation of him, and the world continues to exist as a world. So you have the synergy of being one with God, this world's reality, and experiencing it, the next world's reality, and being able to continue to serve. So why do we need a temple? Because when we have the temple, we have that fusion as well. It's very interesting. Who's building the third temple? Do you know? Who's building it? Who's going to know how to build it?
I thought it was Mashiach.
Mashiach?
I think it's
Okay,
everybody.
that's a vote.
Everybody except the school children.
Everyone except the school children. That's a vote. Anyone
Well,
else? Any other ideas who's building the third temple?
I mean, there's a group of people in Israel already getting ready.
Home HaMikdash. There are people that are, have already started building the vessels. They hope they'll be used. Anyone else? Anyone know? So it's actually debated. It's actually not clear. Why is it not clear? Because there's a very powerful voice of the sages saying, God, the temple, this is the third temple. This isn't like the first and the second, those transient 410, 420 year situations. This is eternal. Eternal means God. This is a temple built by God. But then there's other voices of the sages say, no, no, no. This is a temple built by man. The first temple is built by man. The second temple is built by man. And the third temple will be built by man. What's the seeming resolution? It will be built by God, and man will do some finishing touches, like putting on the doors. So when we speak of the temple descending down to our world, that's a very real statement. It's not allegorical. Literally, a physical temple is descending to our world, built by God. And Mashiach, definitely one version of the sages very strongly seems to be that Mashiach will do the final task to complete it. Why do we need both elements? Well, the God element is that intense spiritual God, permanent. But we also want man's involvement. We also want our fingers on it, because we also want that energy of, and all of that God energy within the physical, expressed by man. So that third temple really symbolizes this whole point we're saying of what this is all about and why we can have like the spirituality of the first, seemingly not very spiritual now, but it's all leading to Mashiach. It's all leading to the third. It's all leading to the synergy of God's essence and being completely revealed in the physical, meaning especially in every dimension of our own reality, in our soul, in the garments of our soul, in our godly and in our animal soul, and in our bodies. In our very bodies, God completely revealed. So let's read some of this inside. So this was sort of reviewing because last class was 100 years ago before Pesach, and many people weren't able to attend last class. So bringing us to where we're basically holding now. So we are looking inside. We are on page 148, 11 lines from the top of 148, 3 words into it. We'll start by that dot right there. V'lachein, and therefore, and we're talking here about the temple and God's presence in the temple. As was mentioned just now, because the Holy of Holies contained God's indwelling presence, the entirety of God's presence, the entirety of Torah, skipping the world, no man could enter there. Enter into the Holy of Holies. Livad, Kohen Gadol, Yom Kippurim. Only the highest Jew, the Jew representing the totality of the Jewish people, on the holiest day. So there was that fusion of soul, space, and time. The holiest Jew, the high priest, on the holiest day, Yom Kippur, in the holiest space, the Holy of Holies. And that was only when it could happen. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe many times loves to bring out this point, how, and by Mashiach, we're all going to go dancing into the temple. Man, women, children, Kohanim, Levites, regular Jews. We'll all go to the Holy of Holies any day we want. Because we're all, again, going to be those personal embodiments of God's home. We're definitely welcome in. But all of this was the temple. We said in the first temple, the energy skipped 2 complete worlds. It was so high. It was so intense. It skipped the worlds of Yitzir and Asiya, formation and descent. In the second temple, it did go through those worlds, but it still skipped that final level of sovereignty, malchus, of the world of descent, of the world of Asiya. And now, in our world, when we're not skipping any levels, Ein lo kadosh baruch hu ba'olamo ela daled amo shel halacha bilvad. Where is God found? Where is God's home? Only in, the sages have a very interesting expression, the Dalit Amos, and Amma is a measurement we call a cubit. It's about 1.5 feet. The 4 cubits, which is measurements of law. Now, law doesn't have cubits. Law is thought. Law is Torah. Law is words. It's not dimensions. It's not physical. But we're saying the 4 cubits, the 4 amos of halacha, to express the concept of the 4 letters of God's holiest name, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, that holiest name invested in the dimensions of Jewish law. Now, I didn't say Jewish law in everything I was talking until now, if you're wondering. I didn't use the word Jewish law. I used the word Torah. Jewish law is one part of Torah. Torah is not only Talmud and Mishnah, Torah is Midrash, Torah is Zohar, Torah is Hasidus, Torah is the scriptures. There's lots and lots of Torah besides Jewish law. All of Torah is God's home. When we learn and live Torah, God has the home inside of us. God has his Holy of Holies inside of us. But the reason our sages say, since the destruction of the temple, God's home is in Jewish law, is because halacha, Jewish law, has a special edge over all the rest of Torah. It has a special advantage. And that advantage, which we have discussed before, is that all of Torah is God's will and wisdom. And actually, will is higher, therefore closer to him, than wisdom. As Hasidus explains this, as Kabbalah also explains, we have God's pleasure, then expressed in his will, you want what you have pleasure in, then expressed in the intellect, in the thoughts, what you want, you then conjure up all the intellect supporting it, and then the emotions, and then the action. So closer to God even than his will, than his wisdom, is his will. All of Torah originally comes from the will of God and then descends into God's wisdom. That's a descent from will into wisdom. And it's a wisdom because Torah is thought processes. So all of Torah is currently wisdom. All of Torah is rooted in will. But uniquely in Jewish law, in halacha, that will element is still overt. Meaning every part of Torah is God's will and wisdom. If I'm learning a verse in Chumash, I'm learning a story in Chumash, forget about the mitzvahs. I'm learning stories, right? I'm learning the stories of what happened, whatever. Noah and the flood, creation, Adam, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, the stories of Torah. Well, those are thoughts. Those are God's wisdom. They're rooted in will. It all starts off in will and then becomes wisdom. But when I learn Jewish law, the will is still clearly evident. Because everything in Jewish law is God's will. I want it like this, and now, or not now, or later, or before, or after, or here, or there, or very, 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 very specific and precise, all the details of law. This is what God wants, or what God does not want. Now, of course, there's also the intellect component, the explanations, the understandings. But what's overwhelming, what's most on the surface in law and only in law, is God's will. So therefore, since will is enrooted even deeper than wisdom, when I am studying law, when the law gets into my brain, when God is housed in my brain, he's housed in a much more deeper expression of self, more intimate expression of self, because the will is overt. But if I'm learning Chumash or Tanya, I'm still God's home. His will and wisdom is still inside of me. But again, the will is more covert, and what's obvious, which is a lower dimension, is God's wisdom. So that's why our sages focus on God doesn't have a home. Fear not, he has a home. Where's his home? In Jewish law. Really? In all of Torah? In the study and in the practice? But like almost the best way to access it, give him the best home possible, is through studying Jewish law. And that's why I think the more one learns Hasidus, the more one is inspired to study Jewish law. If you don't learn Hasidus, you think of Jewish law as a practical how-to manual. And if you know the manual, why bother looking, right? I had to set up my setup different today, and I had it all written down, and I followed all the steps. I'm sure 5 classes from now, hopefully, I won't need to look at the book. I won't look at what I wrote down. I'll know all the steps. So why learn law once you know how to keep the Shabbos, once you know how to keep kosher? Why learn law? Hasidus says, because specifically in law, you forge a connection to the roots of it all, to the Ratzon Ha'elyon, the supernal will, the roots of all of Torah, but here you're accessing them in Jewish law. And that's why it's so important, as the Alter Rebbe explained to us before in chapter 34, to learn law every single day, to give yourself that opportunity to really be the home of God's overt will every single day through your study of Jewish law. Any questions or thoughts on any of this?
Yes. So the Sefer Mitzvahs Rambam, is that considered?
That's a great question, Estorina. Sefer HaMitzvos, I do not believe is Jewish law because it's not the law. It's the topics. But if one was doing the Rambam, meaning there's the whole Mishnah Torah, 3 chapters a day, 1 chapter a day, at your own pace, no chapters a day, that's Jewish law. I don't want to say Sefer Mitzvos is not, because sometimes laws do creep in, but most of the time when we're doing Sefer Mitzvos, we're not doing law. Though occasionally there is law there. But if someone is studying on the 1 chapter a day cycle or the 3 chapters as they cycle Maimonides, that is straight law. So that's a beautiful thing you're pointing out, actually, that when the Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted the cycle of study of Maimonides, he's really helping us, helping many people become God's home on a daily basis, far more than they ever were before. It's also interesting on another level, the Alter Rebbe writes, the author of the Tanya, that every soul has to come back down, keep coming back, reincarnations, until the person did or studied every commandment. Because obviously there are many commandments we're never going to be able to do. I mean, nowadays we can do less than a third. But in all of our lifetimes, we have to make sure, all through all those lifetimes, every commandment was done, or if not done, studied. So here we're at the end of the line. Mashiach's coming now. And the Rebbe institutes a way, a very easy way for all of us to study all of the commandments on an annual basis.